They say you move to the mountains to find silence. Turns out silence has a way of getting loud when people in polos think your dirt belongs to them. 3 days after I parked my truck at the edge of my new property, 60 acres of Virginia highland pine and rock, so quiet, you can hear a hawk blink. I'm splitting deadfall beside a lopsided cabin, and I see a black SUV nosing up the trail, like it missed a turn into a country club. Hood ornament-tinted glass, a white folder baking on the dash. First warning, I wasn't as alone as I thought. I didn't come out here for neighbors or newsletters. I'd spent a lot of years teaching folks how not to die outside the wire, first in the service, then consulting for companies that believed survival training meant a branded carabiner and a trust fall. When the county listed an overlooked chunk of hillside nobody wanted, because a fire 10 years back left it ugly and hard to reach, I paid cash, filed my paperwork the same afternoon, and drove up with a cot, a cooler, and a plan. No meetings. No meetings ever again. The fact that an SUV found me this fast, cruising in like it owned the sunlight, told me someone in town cared about my land a little too much. 3 doors opened like a magic trick. A woman got out, first, blonde bob pearl earrings, hiking boots that had never seen dust, flanked by a square-jawed kid with a clipboard, and a man in a blazer wearing a laminated badge that read, Council Blue Ridge Preserve. She smiled the way mall kiosks smile when they're about to spray you with a sample you can't escape. "Are you Owen Hargrove?" she asked. I didn't step past my gate. "Depends who's asking," I said, and nodded at the badge. "Marla Channing, President." She answered like a mayor greeting a parade. The kid set the white folder on my fence post with 2 fingers. "Notice of compensation, claim," he announced. "Happy to be useful, $50,000 for damages associated with your acquisition of designated community land." "Damages," I repeated, almost tasting the word. "To what your feelings?" Marla didn't blink. "To our long-term environmental plan," she said, hand sliding over a glossy map. "This parcel was marked for integration into our preserve footprint. Your purchase undercut an agreement in progress. An agreement with who?" I asked the coyotes. I told her how I bought this land. Public auction, stamped deed, recorded survey, with GPS coordinates that care about rocks and trees, not wish lists. She absorbed it without absorbing it, the way a poncho absorbs rain long enough to sell you another poncho. "We're here to resolve this amicably," she said. "We're asking for compensation so we can proceed with our stewardship goals." "Steward this," I said, and called the sheriff. He arrived 10 minutes later in a county SUV that still wore last winter's road salt like a wedding ring. Gray mustache, tired eyes, knew the kind of road where the map turns into a rumor. "She in your HOA?" he asked me. "I'm not in anybody's HOA," I said. He looked at Marla's folder, then at my deed, then at my face in a long way that felt like a handshake. "Ma'am," he said to her, "this is private property and you've been asked to leave." The lawyer adjusted his tie like it might help him breathe mountain air. Marla angled her chin. This land was clearly— "You've been asked to leave," the sheriff repeated, and that was that. They packed up slowly, like they were folding a threat into their trunk. The clipboard kid handed me an envelope. "You'll be hearing from us." I dropped it straight into my burn barrel and watched the HOA logo curl like bacon. I figured that would be the end if this were the world I used to believe in. 2 mornings later, a white county pickup rumbled up the trail, the logo on the door for fire safety and risk mitigation. The inspector climbed out neat as a spreadsheet, polite, not hostile, just carrying a stack of forms and a question he had to ask by law. Anonymous tip about an unsafe structure, open flame risk, propane storage. The sort of list that makes you sound guilty even when you're building a gravel pad by hand. I didn't argue. I pulled a folder from my lockbox and gave him the hazard mitigation plan I'd filed the day I signed my deed burn ban. Acknowledgement brush, management map, repair, notices, photos. He walked the site, took pictures, scribbled. When he came back, he shook his head, almost smiling. "You're squared away," he said, scratching out a line on his form. I asked how often HOAs call him about land that isn't theirs. He looked past me at the ridge and said, "Too often, which is government for every day." That evening, I caught at something green glinting where the tree line thins out north of the cabin. Somebody had staked a metal sign into the soil on my side of the line: Future Expansion Zone, Blue Ridge Preserve entry, temporarily restricted. I took a photo with a GPS stamp, and then I took a 12-pound maul to the sign and carried the pieces back like firewood. I burned that too. On a sheet of plywood, I painted "Private land, no HOA authority, trespassers prosecuted," and hung it under a floodlight. Week 3, while I drank black coffee and sketched solar angles on a napkin, like a happy hermit, my phone pinged with an email from a domain I didn't recognize. contact@blueridgepreserve.org. Mail to contact@blueridgepreserve.org. Subject: Confirmation of Integration Agreement signed. Inside was a 2-page PDF on their letterhead, claiming I'd joined their association, willingly accepting mutually beneficial terms, including a $50,000 payment to offset delayed development. At the bottom was my signature copied well enough to give me a cold feeling behind the ribs. I stared at those loops like they were biting me. Somebody had seen my handwriting and traced it like homework. I forwarded it to my attorney, Meera Patel, smart, steady, allergic to nonsense, and called her while the email was still in the air. "Tell me it's the thing," she said. "It's the thing I said." And they faked my name. Her voice dropped an octave. There's a tone lawyers use when the ball finally bounces their way. "Okay," she said. "We're not playing small anymore. I need the raw email headers, the metadata, timestamps, everything. We'll file with the clerk and the sheriff today. Don't post it. Not yet." I promised nothing. By lunch, Meera had filed criminal complaints, impersonation, forgery, attempted fraud. By dinner, I was on the Blue Ridge Preserve website, where a smiling stock photo lumberjack was labeled "Mr. Hargrove, new member, joins the conservation vision." I wasn't smiling. I archived the page. Then I recorded every bit of it on a thumb drive that now lives in my safe under a pair of socks and stubbornness. When you force me to defend my home, I don't just lock doors, I build a perimeter. I wired trail cams and motion sensors along the western tree line, mounted cheap cameras with fat batteries in weatherproof boxes, set a little quad drone in a roof hatch, because I'm a nerd for redundancy. The first creep showed at 2:30 in the morning, grainy night vision of a man in black crouching by the back door, gloved hands running the frame for an alarm, a tool glinting at his hip. He whispered into a phone, then vanished when the door wouldn't play along. The next afternoon, a drone zipped over my porch and dropped a laminated card that read, "Never forgets you are not above the community." Cute. I fed it to the barrel too. The day after that, 3 guys in windbreakers stenciled HOA security hiked up the path before dawn with bolt cutters and a clipboard like they were going to evaluate my crescent wrenches. They tripped my buried alert, and I popped my floodlights daytime at night. They froze, looked up into a lens, and ran for their truck, the way raccoons run when a dog finally remembers it's a dog. License plate captured. Faces captured. Clipboard captured, which still makes me laugh. I stitched the footage together clean and sent copies to Meera and the sheriff, and this part was for me to a reporter from the county weekly who'd left a message after the forged PDF appeared. I also found 3 tiny cameras screwed into birdhouses facing my cabin SIM cards, live streaming to a cloud account, hosted on the preserve's domain. That was the moment something inside me stopped worrying about quiet and started worrying about